welcome to the tutorial for the R Curious. This tutorial is a really special tutorial, and as such it needs a little bit of an introduction. So the talented people donating their time to introduce you to R today are part of a global movement you may have heard of called R Ladies. And they invited me here to reflect upon that movement and its significance in the R community. So what do I see when I see R Ladies? I see a movement that has grown to an expansive network, and just like pipes that carry water or wires that carry electricity, this network carries a very precious resource, and that resource will be vital for the journey you're about to undertake today. And actually it's pretty vital for anything that's worthwhile. So I see R Ladies as a collective that is a reservoir for the resource of resilience. And resilience that they have nurtured within each other and are now transmitting through this network to people in challenging circumstances. And it's been an amazingly impactful endeavor. And I think that by acknowledging R Ladies, we are simultaneously acknowledging that there are structural features of our community that have meant that certain groups of people have required more resilience to succeed. So when they faced struggles and had no reservoir to call on, they got fed up and they moved on. And our community is less diverse than it should be because of these facts. And that's a shame. But luckily for us, some especially determined people stuck it out, they fought on, they found each other, they built that network, and now that network is reaching out to you. And it's got its own original ideas about how to induct you into our community in an inclusive and supportive way. So thank you, and I hope you enjoy yourselves.
Thank you, Miles. Welcome to R Curious, the workshop for those who wanted to experiment with R at university but didn't get around to. I'm here with Steph De Silva and Kim Fitter and Saras. We're your friendly presenters. There's also other people here who will be helping out, and we'll all be talking to each other. We're R Ladies. There are many, many chapters. I myself am from R Ladies Remote. Steph, what do you identify as? R Ladies Sydney or R Ladies Remote, or both?
I'm on both, R Ladies Sydney and R Ladies Remote, and I guess we're shortly going to be launching R Ladies TARDIS at this point. So two places at once at the moment.
And Kim?
I'm in Auckland, so Auckland R Ladies.
Saras?
I'm in Melbourne, so R Ladies Melbourne.
And I live in the rural Victoria, surrounded by kangaroos. So I'm R Ladies Remote, which I'm so psyched has just launched, because otherwise I had no chapter to go to, other than talking to the kangaroos. Not so interested. And do we have other R Ladies here? Going to be R Ladies. Right. Excellent. So let's get into it. Difficulty setting for this workshop. This is an intro to R workshop. It's a R for Newbies workshop. I myself am not an advanced R user. I don't identify as a super hardcore. To use gaming analogy, I would describe myself as playing on normal difficulty. So when you open a video game, it'll usually give you three options. One is the easy option. The pew pew sound of my gun freaks me out. And then there's normal setting, and then there's like hardcore, death is the true death kind of. I don't play Tidyverse on that setting. I play Tidyverse on normal setting. Yeah, and that's something we want to combat with this workshop is we hear a lot, right, anecdotally, that people are thrust into situations when they're first learning R where they feel inadequate, they feel like they don't know enough, they're sitting there going, I can't even install it, and you're onto for loops, and I'm lost. So we're trying to address that and take more of a plush toy approach to learning R. And we're here to learn together because, for example, I'm running this using a function from R at the moment, and the technology to create these slides did not exist when I was doing my undergraduate. So even running this workshop, I had never been to a workshop like the one that I've written, because the technology to do it this way didn't exist. So everything, and the technology is rolling out so fast that everything's a work in progress for teachers, for learners. Everyone is figuring it out as we go. So I'm hoping to, improve this workshop through, this is the second time I've run it and I've already made improvements from the first time. And hopefully I'll learn things today and we'll keep improving it and put it into the R-Ladies pool of resources for use for all R-Ladies and everyone else. Now the notes for this workshop, these slides, we're going to access them. So you will get, during this workshop, you will get your own copy of these slides. So you do not need to write down any notes. You'll get everything yourself, and then you will be able to annotate your own notes. And there's not a great deal of code. This is a workshop. We're going to use cheat sheets. We're going to use each other and the internet, and we're going to figure out problems together. So I haven't provided a great deal of code. In fact, there's no code. There's only pseudocode using quacks. Quacks. So this is something I'm toying around with. What I'm trying to do is move away from workshops where we copy and paste code. I've certainly gone to workshops myself where I feel like because I've copied and pasted and I haven't thought for myself, I haven't learned as much as I could have. So how can I improve on that? And I'm trying out this. It worked fairly well the first time, so I'm hoping it'll work for you guys today. So I just want to flag that I'll be using pseudocode, and that will be indicated with the quacks. So when you see things wrapped around that, that means that's where your code goes in, including the quacks. The quacks are just there to indicate that's for you. So the quacks are not part of code, that's the pseudocode. That's just to wrap something up to show this is where you go. So quacks, that's where your turn is. And yeah, so for example, here's an R function. So if I wanted to install packages, I could use this function, and here in my quacks, you write your code there. So if I wanted to install the package metaphor, for example, which I do a lot, I would use the code there. So I will not actually type into my computer the quacks, right? That's where we use our thinking. And survival tips, which I think Kim touched on before, is using the whole, nobody learns it all in undergrad, absolutely nobody. And so we need to avail ourselves of everything that we can. There's help documentation, cheat sheets, we're going to make a great deal of use of those today. And I think it's really important to underline that modern day coding really, for me, comprises almost entirely of typing, how do I do X in language into the internet? And also, finally, that the community with, chapters such as R-Ladies and forums like the RStudio community forum, which I highly recommend, are fantastic resources for learning. And so today we're going to try to simulate all of that. You will talk to each other. You're each other's community today, including us. And the cheat sheets we'll be accessing from RStudio after we set that up. Oh yeah. And it's okay to get really frustrated with some of the things that are seemingly simple. The installation process can be quite painful. Getting set up and just getting started can actually be a much larger barrier. Certainly for me, it's often a much larger barrier than actually writing script and understanding the syntax of code. So for me, I come from a mathematics background, and understanding mathematical algorithms is less scary to me than understanding how the computer works. I don't know about things like servers, and I'm currently learning a little bit of Git and the command line, and a lot of this is new to me. I don't have a computer science background. And for those of us who don't really understand the computer all that technically, it really can be deeply, deeply frustrating. And I think that for newbies, that can be lost on them, and it can feel like you're the only one experiencing this, and it's easy for everyone else. And so I want you to think of the panda and remember that, would we agree that we've all been there? We're all the panda. I'm frequently the panda. And you're more than welcome to be the panda today. So you've all been handed sticky notes. So you've got 3 different colours, and if you're, feeling happy and good and settled and everything's fine and hunky-dory, then stick a yellow sticker to the top of your laptop lid. So hopefully you're all feeling yellow right now. And pink is the rage quit option, the one where you're like, things are not going so well. What does that mean? What was that? What did that guy say when I said what that guy say? That's what pink is for. And then I've added a 3rd colour. I've totally stolen this system. I stole this from a workshop I went to with Nick Tierney and Roger Peng on building R packages. I believe they stole it from software carpentry, so I should acknowledge that that's where the brilliant idea came from. But I'm adding a 3rd colour today for people who get a little, they've done it and they want to move on to something else. Once we get the presentation notes, I'll show you where the extension exercises are. And so once you've done the exercise and you want to move on, you can stick a green sticker on, and then other people know that you're working on extension exercises, and you can join together and have a go at things together while other people are still sorting out the exercise. So, yeah, hopefully everyone's looking yellow. Does everyone have a yellow sticky note attached to their laptop lid? Thank you. And that way we know who needs help and who's on the brink of rage quitting, and who's happy, and who's actually moved on. Like, if you've all got green notes, then I'm taking too long, waffling. So, what is R? Steph, do you want to talk a little on this one? Because I reckon you would speak very well to this slide.
I see the process of data analysis as really about exploratory interrogation. Whenever somebody hands me a new data set, I'm always asking questions about it. And R is the toolkit that I use to ask a lot of those questions. How many people here have done a data analysis before? Might have been Excel, might have been R. You've been handed a data set at some point, right?
I imagine you've done a data analysis.
He's very new. So when we start out, we've got a lot of questions about our data. Now that may be a very specific hypothesis if it was handed to you from somebody else. It may be a hypothesis that you formulated before you even collected your data. In my case, I'm a consultant and I never have any idea what's going to happen 2 hours from now. That is my life. I'm constantly asking questions. So R uses a data detectives in a lot of ways. We are interrogating that data to find out what we need to know, what it knows, what it can reasonably tell us about our questions, and also what it can't. So we're going to cover this idea from R for Data Science. Now this is a workflow that's used quite heavily at RStudio. Certainly I use an extended version of that in my consulting work. Obviously consulting has a couple of ends to that as well. And we're going to try and cover everything except model today. So we're going to talk about importing your data. And one of the really amazing things about R is its interoperability. Many of you may not have been around the data analysis world back in the bad old days, where if your data was stuck in a proprietary format, that was where it stayed. Because it was honestly just easier to learn SAS or SPSS than to get it out in the first place. We've got R now, and that imports many different kinds of data. So we'll be talking about that. We'll also be talking about tidying our data. Has anybody ever worked with real data from the field before? Have you ever been handed? Yeah, right? Okay, then you know all about tidying and cleaning. I tell people that I have 2 specialties in consulting, data hazmat and data grief counselling. The data hazmat is next level data cleaning and tidying, and the data grief counselling comes afterwards. Okay. We'll also be talking about visualization. Now, visualization is a critical tool in both understanding our data and finding the insights that have value, as well as being able to communicate those insights to non-technical stakeholders. Does anybody ever work with anybody who is not technical? Yeah, that is my job, to obfuscate and abstract away from the technical so people can understand what's going on. And obviously visualization is a very huge part of that. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about communicating those results in a way that doesn't make you want to beat your head against a desk. Has anybody ever done a huge long report and you've given it to your stakeholder and they're like, great, can you change these 3 simple things? And then you have to go through and change every single number, chart, table, equation in a 100-page report, and those 3 simple things end up taking you 3 days? We've got a solution for that. Okay. All right, so to start out, we're going to need some data.
Mm-hmm. And on the communication, just to add to the communication part, that you're going to get these slides and look at how you can build documents and presentations just like this. So, this workshop is not just data analysis, it's communication is a big part of it, and navigating the GUI in order to get to that point. Communicating with yourself is sometimes an even bigger obstacle. So we need a data set. If we are going to, we're going to emulate this workflow, we're going to be R coders today, and we're going to do our first data analysis in R, except for the modeling, just because of time. We need a fitting data set. So, I needed to pick something, and I suggested a data set that actually came from an analysis that Steph did, and Di sent me the blog post, and I went, this is it. So we need a data set that's that's appropriate for a workshop that's advocating for underrepresented minorities, and trying to address some of the systematic or systemic discrimination that can occur. We're going to use witch trials data set. Why might that be relevant? Well, Michelle Wolf, she's a comedian, and she was invited to give a presentation at the White House Press Correspondents' Dinner recently. And she excoriated Trump. And when I looked up her name and plugged in witch, this is the image on the first page. She, the meanest thing she said, by the way, the meanest thing she said was that Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the press secretary of the White House, that she said something mean about her eyeshadow. But for that, she gets called a witch. This is an Australian conference, so I have to point to the unbelievable sexism our first female Prime Minister was subjected to. Here's an image of the opposition. They were calling her a liar and saying, ditch the witch. She was my favourite Prime Minister of all time. And of course, it wouldn't be complete without Hillary Clinton. These images all came from the first page of an image search for female leader and the word witch. So we're going to do a deep dive into some witch trials data. But I didn't actually read the paper. But luckily, we have the person who wrote the analysis that inspired this workshop here. So I thought Steph might tell us a bit about the data set.
So the witch trials data set came from a paper that was recently released. And what these authors did was they went through all of the historical records for witch trials, so burning people at the stake stuff, between I think the 11th and the 15th centuries. And they collated all this data and worked out how many people were tried, where they were tried, what were the outcomes, and lots of other things. And what they were showing was that the witch trials were also political, and they were able to prove that empirically. They then went ahead and made their data set available on GitHub for everybody to have a crack at. And it's a really interesting data set because it goes into the history of Europe. It looks at a period of incredible injustice, but it also speaks to how injustice is a part of a broader social fabric. And we can do that with data analysis, which is kind of fun. So I think that's probably all we need to know to get started. That's the background of it. Let's see what's on the next page. The process of structuring something that is otherwise fairly unstructured so we can look at it in a whole new way. So I don't know if anybody's ever heard of the field of cliometrics. Cliometrics is the study of data analysis type things in a historical context. And it's not a well-known field, but that is the sort of thing that the very few cliometricians out there do.
Wow.
And also economic historians do a lot of this sort of work as well. And I find that really interesting. So
I think it's a really good point. That that cleaning the data and structuring it can be a way bigger task than
absolutely.
The actual analysis component. My first data analysis project was at a biomedical research institution. I was a second-year student and got thrust into this scholarship thing, and I was given a research project, high throughput chemical screening data, and it was CSVs upon CSVs with these incomprehensible genetics codes and things attached to them, and trying to wrangle that into a usable form for me to run a statistical model as I was being taught in my second year undergraduate courses. The gap, it was a chasm between the data I was handed and what I was being trained to do in class, because in class I was handed a very clean data set. Today we're going to touch on data cleaning a bit, because as you rightly pointed out, is a really, really important component, and we'll talk about how you can extend and troubleshoot your way out of those kind of situations, because we can't possibly cover it all here. So what we can do is give you tips on how to problem solve your way through your data analysis when you come to do your own. I wrote this workshop in collaboration with our ladies with the intention of not teaching you heaps and heaps of stuff today, but trying to empower future you. Because if you've come to this workshop, it's likely you intend to do a data analysis in R at some point. But perhaps it may not be tomorrow. Maybe it's going to be in 6 months when you won't remember everything from this workshop. So what can we impart to you today that will empower you, the future you that actually has the spare afternoon, which is unlikely at this time of year for most academics and researchers and people in industry. But, maybe come summertime when things slow down, you might find that you've got a spare afternoon to look into something. Like I myself wanted to figure out how to produce a blog in R over this summer. And so I spent a couple of days doing that, but that was when I had time. So how do I empower future you who vaguely remembers this workshop? That's the goal. And in order to answer the question that was raised, which was, well, what is the structure of the data? Like how much work do we have to do? We need to, actually get our mittens on that data and take a look at it, right? Yeah, what do we want to know about the data? And don't worry, you will get these slides, so you'll have a template for how to embed GIFs and images and all sorts of things you can absolutely steal. And I'm really hacking it together myself. So if you see improvements or shortcuts or things I can do, by all means, let me know. So I think we started with a great question of what is the form of the data? One of the questions that I absolutely always have is, what actual data do we have access to? I mean, we can't possibly have access to every witch trial that's ever happened, right? It's going to be restricted by time, it's going to be restricted by potentially location, all sorts of things. Maybe the paper, I haven't actually read the paper, Steph's read the paper, but maybe they restricted the scope of what they looked at to in some way, historically or geographically or in some other way. Oh, and the one thing before I move on to the next thing was you were talking about mapping data over geographically. Then if you, when you get the slides, there'll be an extension exercise at the very end that asks you to map the witch trials data geographically on a world map. So you might be really interested in diving into that. It's actually what I did first. So when I popped open this data set, I myself was working on a software package that was mapping systematic reviews geographically for ecological studies. And so I had in my head, how to implement plots on a map and put dots on a map using longitude and latitude. So the first thing, because that was fresh in my mind, when I looked at the witch trials data set, the very first thing I did was do that, was plot the dots on a map. So it's one of the extension exercises, and I'm very happy for you to flag me down, and we can work on that. And if anyone is interested in learning that skill, you can hopefully join this lovely person here and learn together. So we need to answer the questions that have been posed. What data do we have available? What is the structure of the data? So we need to get in there and have a look at it. How are we going to do that? Well, there's lots of ways we could approach data analysis. There's a whole world of Python myself that I don't even know anything about. And the reason for that is R just keeps being able to do everything I need it to do. I keep dabbling in other languages, but I just never seem to come across a reason to use anything else much. And that's because I am primarily interested in data analysis, and R is the language that was written specifically for data analysis. So in this workshop, we're going to use the language R, and we're going to use the IDE, Integrated Development Environment, RStudio, in order to interface with the language R. Why these tools? Well, as opposed to other languages, R was specifically designed with data analysis in mind, so I suppose that's one compelling reason. I like it, but I can't really speak comparatively because I haven't used other languages. But I just want to highlight that this is not the only way of doing it, and this is just the way I know about doing it, and it's the way I like doing it, so we put together a workshop on this way. And And I liked this analogy, actually. Di, who organised user, she put me onto this, that the way to think about the language and the environment to interface with the language is that the language is the airplane, but the environment that you're working in, RStudio, is the airport. The plane is really cool and can do really cool stuff, but if you don't have an airport, it's not very useful. And that came from Julia Nowens. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, that particular analogy. So let's get started. If we're going to use R and RStudio, we better get ourselves set up. How many people have managed to download? Actually, if you haven't downloaded yet, would you flip over to a pink post-it, please? Just so I can get a feel for who hasn't downloaded R and RStudio already. Everyone's already downloaded it? Fantastic. Wow, thank you. That's incredibly awesome. So we're all good and we can skip the installation instructions, is that correct? Well, that was just the installation. Yeah, apparently everyone's installed. I know. I mean, like, you send out the request, but you don't expect everyone to comply. So it's lovely. Thank you. So today we're going to use within RStudio, a special type of folder called a project. It's just a way of bundling together all your files, and this was one of the things that surprisingly even advanced R users in my Sydney workshop, some of them were saying that this was an absolute revelation to them, because if you were trained in R prior to, like 5 years ago, then yeah, R projects are quite new. And so a lot of people haven't, like my supervisor doesn't work in art projects, for example. And it's a wonderful shortcut for dealing with a lot of fiddly, annoying things that can be thrown up, and that we data analysts and statisticians who care more about the mathematical algorithms than learning all about the computer hardware, it takes care of a lot of that kind of stuff. So we're going to work in an R project. So, and another reason to work in R projects is it really facilitates reproducible research, which could be easily a whole string of workshops in and of itself. But I just want to point to how useful and wonderful it is. So let's get started. Let's open up RStudio and open a new project. Don't forget you've got sticky notes.
So is there anybody here who hasn't opened a new project in R before?
We go to File and New Project. All right, not everyone has installed RStudio, so let's just flick back to installation of RStudio. And it's really easy to get tripped up between R and RStudio. It's easy to open up R and think, oh yes, I've opened it up, but where's Create Projects? What's the list that Charles is talking about? And that's because you're in R, but not RStudio. I'm seeing RStudio, wonderful, wonderful. You ready to, yeah, if you've created your project, please switch over to a green post-it so that we know you're ready to move on to the next thing. Yeah, so I think you're going to need to download and install RStudio. So we'll do it from let's use the instructions up here. So go to the RStudio website, and it was the first, when I looked up RStudio, just doing a Google search a few weeks ago, it was the first thing that came up. Oh, well, that's what this workshop's all about, right? So let's choose RStudio and scroll down to the blue Download RStudio option. So let's go to the website. And then you're going to choose which platform you're on. So you're using a Windows computer, I believe? Yeah. And I'm just going to flick you over to pink so we know that we're still working on that. Yellow is fine. Pink's for like, we're still working on it. Great. And so we should be able to just double click on what you've downloaded to install it, like a, you follow the prompts kind of thing. Click on yes. While we're just getting everyone set up with RStudio, one of the first exercises is going to be writing down in your notes a tip about R, what I wish I'd known. So have a chat to the people sitting next to you and ask them whether, everyone has used R to differing levels of ability. Some people haven't used it at all. Some people are very advanced and are sitting in. So have a chat to the people around you and ask them, do they have a cool tip or something they learned about R, something they wish they'd known from the start, but they only figured out recently. Yeah, sure. Yeah, if you want to shout them out to Steph, she'll put them up on the board. For me, it's all about workflows. Yes. You know how everybody's really obsessed with every new model and it's got to be done this way, we must real data scientists? Forget about it. There'll be another new one on the minute. Workflows that improve my practice. You guys made your, so, the sticky notes. So this means I need help. And this one means I'm all good. So are you good? Yeah. Okay. You're good? Oh, wait. So we stick it up so I can see it, like sticking up. Yeah, like that. That's good. Like a little flag, so we know, where you guys are at. And so, and green is, yeah, I did it. I'm bored. I want to do something interesting. I want to do something cooler and move on to the extension exercises. So once we get the slides, there will be access to extension exercises. The piping, it was a real, like getting my head around. Once I got it, it was so much easier, but if you started in base, it's quite, I think it can be, I have seen it be very confronting for base high users to come across tidyverse syntax. Really? Yes, we're going to learn about that too. Tidyverse is a meta package of many packages in R, and we're going to talk about what packages are and what the tidyverse is in the upcoming slides. So we'll have a little bit more detail about those things. How are we doing with the installation of RStudio? All right, cool. So everyone else has got their project set up, so let's get going. So you've opened up your RStudio and you're confronted with, do I have RStudio open? All right, so here's RStudio, and you can see I'm running this presentation from R and from RStudio, and we are presented with these many panes and things, and there's windows everywhere, and it's really quite intimidating. It's a lot. So what we're going to do is just sort of meet the windows one at a time and take it nice and easy. And here I've just embiggened that window there, but I've still got the same 4-pane setup that you guys have. So you've got these 4 different corners and keyboard shortcut. All right, so we're going to start with a couple of useful panes, the console and the environment, and we're going to meet them one at a time. But before we do, I just want to point you to our very first cheat sheet of the day. So we can access cheat sheets by going to Help, Cheat Sheets, and RStudio cheat sheet. So let's just all open the cheat sheet just so we know how, and I'll do it too. There we go. So I'm going to Help, and the cheat sheets. And take a look at it. Now, we're going to use several cheat sheets in this workshop. One for data wrangling, one for data visualization, and this one's getting to know the environment. So, and this one is, I think the cheat sheet itself is actually more intimidating than the environment, but there is a wealth of knowledge. And the one thing I really want to highlight about the cheat sheets, because you'll open them up and cheat sheet kind of implies that it's going to make your life easier and that it's, just a few tips. These cheat sheets, I encourage you to think of them more like textbooks that you will deep dive over years. I am still learning. I learn every day from these cheat sheets. There is so much information crammed into them. And for some reason, it's not opening for me. Is it opening for everyone else? Good. And so as you can see, it's quite messy, the cheat sheet. It's got a lot of stuff on it. And so it's when you're trying to get to know this environment and all these windows and everything, when you've got a question about how it works, you can go to this cheat sheet to understand what all those windows are. Now we're going to pull back for a second, so I just wanted to show you the full extent of knowledge you can have. Now we're going to pull back and just look at one of those panes. And back to the talk. That's what I'm doing. All right. Let's start with, let's actually run some code, right? That's what we're here for. We'll start with the console. So think of the console like a calculator. Is that what you would think of the console like? It's like a... Yeah, I do everything in R. I do my tax in R. The console is a calculator. So and by default, it's located in the lower left pane. So you've got like 4 sort of corners of your IDE, your RStudio, and in the bottom left corner, you'll find the console. So let's try typing in 3 plus 2 into the console. What do you get? Now, you can put in, this console is your interface directly to R. You can ask R, calculate this for me. And the power of R is that it has within it many, many, many algorithms that people have spent a lot of time writing up. I myself am training to do that in my own PhD. And we can then use those algorithms that other people have written to run quite sophisticated statistical analyses. So did we all get some output? What did we get? Yeah, so you punch it in just like a calculator, it gives you the value back. But we could fit, models, we can do all sorts of quite fancy, cool stuff. So it's like, I think of it like a souped up calculator. Yeah, jump in.
Is anyone here, is it moving a bit slow for you? Is anyone who's experienced as kind of a helper who'd like to walk around?
Yeah, please. Chat to people.
Yeah, as you've said, it's supposed to be very interactive. So.
Rowdy. I like people talking to each other and learning together.
It might be that you don't have 4 panels. It might be that you opened it up and you have 2 on the right side and 1 big one on the left.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because some people, I changed it because I thought that was the default. And then some people are like, no, it's defaulted with an open thing. There you go.
There's a little button that looks like 2 little overlapping squares. And if you tap that in the top right corner of that side, from here, that should separate them out into this format.
So that's great if you want to do one calculation, one line, but what if you want to, store something and keep playing with it? Say, for example, I want to import a data set, and then I want to add a column that's some calculations, that data set, and maybe I want to subtract one variable. I did this morning. I had like a column of treatment values and a column of the control responses, and I was interested in the differences between the two, so I wanted to subtract the 2 columns. And this is one thing that R does just wonderfully. But in order to do that, I want to, take the data set, store it, and keep it as an object that I can play with. And this is where we're going to meet the environment. So if I wanted to store, say, a character string, in quotation marks, the cake is a lie, in an object called, what did I call it? Cake. Although I have been informed, actually, the cake is not a lie. There will be cake at lunch, but if I wanted to store that, I would use the assign operator. So that's this arrow symbol here. So that arrow is made up of like half a quack, a quack, and a dash. Quack dash for assign. So what happens in the environment when you store the number 5 in whatever you want to call it? I called it X, but you can call it whatever you like. And it doesn't have to be 5. It can be anything you like. Character string, a logical value, true or false. What do you see in your environment? And does everyone see something appear in their environment pane?
Who can tell me how to store an object called X that contains the number 5? What do I write? never heard that before. Okay, and then arrow. I think that it's an arrow. Okay, and then, okay.
And so does everyone see something appear? Environment. Yeah.
It does work. I'd say most people do use it.
So you should then have an X object appear in your environment.
Yeah. So if you're not seeing anything appear in your environment, would you please switch over to a pink sticky note? And if you have what you expected to see appear in your environment, yellow. All right, I'm not seeing any pinks. We're all good. Do you want to talk about data structures, Kim? Go for it. Just to give them a break from my voice. Yeah, objects, structures. Yeah, data types is probably more accurate. Huh. Yeah, I was like at the arrow, like 5 is going into X. It's sending 5 into the X. So I like the arrow because it's sort of illustrative. Is that a stretch or a talk? So I don't like to because I like to keep my equals for arguments, and so I can differentiate between when there are arguments, when there are arrows. And something I came across on the weekend was going through simulations, and when you're building a simulation piece by piece and adding in all these different layers, using the equals as a sign in the first instance to remind myself that these will eventually become arguments in a function, I found quite useful. So I found that to be kind of, for me to differentiate between arguments of a function versus the storing an object, I find it useful to use the two different symbols. And then that simulation example is sort of taking that to the next level and using it to remind myself of the different hierarchies. Yeah.
I noticed that was too complicated.
Yeah, that's sort of,
You should use this one.
yes, exactly.
I don't remember why, but when they taught me, they said that.
Yeah, this is absolutely, the consensus is that it is best practice. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, you're short. I like that.
Wait, I have a question.
Yeah.
Why do we need to store a number into X? We could just use 5.
We could just use 5, but what if I had that column, like what if I have a whole table and I've stored it in a thing, and then I want to run models on the table and all sorts of other things. So we want to store objects so we can play with them and tool around with them later. Like for example, I stored a data set as an object this morning, ran a model on it, but then I wanted to take that object and produce a summary from the object, but also produce a plot from that object. So it was really useful to store the object in the environment so I could reuse it twice, rather than having to generate this whole table, with adding the columns and all that stuff that I did each time that I want to either, produce a summary, run a model, or construct a visualization. It's nice to use the work up to this point. Say you've cleaned and scrubbed and joined this data together, and often that's quite complicated, so you don't want to do that again. You want to take your data now that you've got it, and now you want to look at what you can do and use it for exploration, using visualization and summaries. Yes, except on my Linux machine, for some reason it conflicts with, I think it's over in Ubuntu, maybe not. But if you're on Windows and Mac, I think it's fine.
So I was just going to ask, so who of you have used a programming language before, so not R? Comes from.
Right, so about half the room.
Who's never done any coding or used a programming language before?
Cool.
Great. So I suppose most of you would be familiar with data types and structures. So if you've coded before, you know that objects will have a type. So they'll either be numbers or they can be logical, which is true or false. In R, there are a few other types. So there'd be things called data frames, which is that unique to R?
I don't know, but a data frame is just a table.
Yeah.
It's like it's an R version of a table.
So, and a data frame can have, so think of a table, but it can have lots of types in it. So it can be a mix of numerics, of characters, of logical.
Yeah, and I think of it like a really sort of fancy spreadsheet, really. Like, it's like what we see in a spreadsheet. You know, you've got your different cells. You could put true or false in them. You could put characters in there, put a word in there. You could put numbers in there, or even calculations.
And so who of you have used Excel before? Is there anyone who comes from Excel before?
Yeah,
Great, because that's another thing we've got.
as an extension.
One of the extensions is kind of comparing Excel to R and what you would do in Excel and how you would do it in R. So if you do at any point want to move on to that, just put, what colour is it? The green, and we'll show you where that is. And you can play around with that.
And there we've got in an example of what a table output might look like in R. That's a canonical dataset, the iris dataset. It comes preloaded in R. I find it very useful for trying things out. So which trials dataset is a table? And we want to get that table into R so we can play around with it. And this table is in what is known as a tidy format. So we're starting to move towards a tidyverse. For those of you who are interested in learning more about the tidyverse is geared for data of this structure, where the rows are observations and the columns are the variables. So say, for example, I had, I was interested in, for some reason I'm thinking about that orthodontics data set, but like there was children and their teeth measurements. But you have each child and child 1, child 2, child 3 in the rows and the measurement of their teeth. So you've got two columns, one for the child, say the child's name, and or their subject number of his trial, and then you've got a column for the measurement that was done. So the columns are your variables and the rows are the observations. And the tidyverse is a suite of packages and tools that we can bring into R and use for data structured like this. And it facilitates all sorts of really cool stuff within the tidyverse, from, building blogs, presentations, data analyses, modeling, all sorts of stuff, all built around tables of this structure. This workshop, we're going to use R Markdown. And in R Markdown, we can run code in chunks. We can also write text, LaTeX, all sorts of other things outside of the code. The code chunks can actually run all sorts of things, not just R. I myself just ran my first bash chunk, so I was very proud of myself. But you can use Python. In fact, I heard a guy who was one of the leading RStats coders, but is also a very, very strong Python coder. And he said to me that he feels that RStudio is going to take over as the dominant tool for Python coders because he thinks it's that good. So I thought it was a very interesting point. I certainly find using R Markdown to be it's like the best thing since sliced bread. You can do everything in it, right? So I myself, I don't use Word. I don't even have it installed on my computer. I do everything in Markdown. And you can make websites, presentations, such as this presentation is built in R Markdown. So let's open up a Markdown document and compile it. It so rocks my world. R Markdown is one of my favorite things I've discovered in the last year. I also build all my slides in it now. Oh yeah, for some reason when you open it, it came up as that when I ran it on a test subject, my husband, that's what it opened up for him. So maybe it'll just say Untitled 1 for you. Don't worry about it. Yeah, it's fine, it's fine. If it says Untitled 1, so I ran this as on my poor guinea pig husband the first time, and when he tried to run these instructions, it came up with Untitled 2. If it comes with Untitled 1, it's fine. It's just an untitled document.
So it doesn't matter which format?
Nope. Oh, well, it will. We're going to do HTML, but I mean, for this is just, we're just going to knit our document for funsies. So, yeah, HTML. Yeah, let's stick with all the default settings. Yeah, well, I'm just saying, just stick with your default options. Don't change them, just put in a name. Like, just put in the title. Because we can play around with the options later. Like, let's just get started. So when you give it a title, when it opens up that box, all it's doing is putting a title into the document. It is not saving the file with that name. Your file hasn't been saved. It's still just, if you closed it down and you didn't save, you would lose that document. You've put a title into the actual text of the document, but you haven't saved it. So we also need to save the document to knit it. Yeah? I just want them to go with the default, which will be HTML. Yeah, so don't change anything, just put in your title, and so give your document a title and press OK. That's what I want you to do. And that will be this workshop. You know, you can just assume you're going with default options, you're just clicking OK. Like we're just, you've got the rest of your lives to explore all the possibilities that R will open up to you. We're just trying to get started. Yeah. Have we all knitted? Excellent. So, now that we've done that, it's opened up a tutorial document, and I can't stress enough that this is an absolute treasure trove of things. It's really, really useful. It gives you an example of how to use a plot in a Markdown document, how to put in headings, all sorts of stuff. And I want you to remember that when you open up a Markdown document, you get this template for free. So you can get it back anytime you like. And so we're not going to go into it in depth today. You've got plenty of time to look at that, but just remember that there's lots of tips there for how to put in plots and how to put in headings and things if you forget. And of course, we've also got cheat sheets. So now that we've knitted them, we can actually get the notes for this workshop and start. And those of you who are like, I know all this stuff already, Charles, you can move on to extension exercises. So let's get the notes for this workshop and knit them. Let's delete everything. You can get the tutorial back by opening up a new Markdown document anytime you like. And we're going to go to my GitHub account. If you just do an internet browser search for Soft Loud, which is my GitHub account. I spent 20 years working as a musician prior to this current transition into mathematical science. And Soft Loud is the English translation of pianoforte. I was a pianist for 20 years. And piano, of course, is short for pianoforte. Just like cello is short for violoncello. Lots of people don't know that one either. And of course, there was an era in the 17th century prior to the invention of the pianoforte where there was the forte piano. That's right, Steph's also a pianist, so we have... Oh, yeah. Excellent, we've got another pianist in Grace. I love it. And so... And once you've done all of that, would you please switch over to a green sticky so I know you're done with that? Well, we all know that you're done with that.
Was it yellow?
Oh, yeah. No, sorry, yellow, yes. Yellow or green, yeah. Yeah, so I haven't quite figured out how the sticky note signaling should work. Like, you know, how to sort of indicate we're done with that, but not ready to move on to the extension. I think green because... Or maybe it's confusing. Yeah, all right, we'll stick with yellow. Yellow if we're all good. But how do we know if we're still working on it? It's a tricky thing. Hey, that's great. Nice one. All good. Oh, did you get on board with the sticky notes? Are you up with that?
Sorry?
Yeah. Oh, you got a yellow one?
No, which
Nice
one?
one. Yeah. I'll just pop it upwards so that
Oh, right.
I can tell from either direction.
Yeah.
There you go. How you doing? Welcome. Take a seat.
where do you go? What's the click on raw?
Yeah. So let's go to the actual Markdown document. So we've got to click on the workshop.rmd file. And
then that's where.
there it is. And I just dropped my companion cube. Where'd he go? Oh, there he is. Yeah.
Yeah, and I had this error before when I just ran so I don't know.
Interesting. Yep. So for some reason, it's not prompting you to install your packages. Did you have that error before when you tried to run the template document? Yeah. Excellent. So let's install. We're going to have to install these packages manually.
Okay.
So we're actually going to cover this in some future slides, but we'll do it together. So you're going to get a sneak peek of what we're going to
Just install packages?
Yep, install our packages. And we want R Markdown. So you're cool with installing packages?
Yes.
Excellent, cool. So let's try, yeah.
R Markdown?
R Markdown.
Capital R?
No, I think it's all lowercase, one word. And it looks like you need knit R as well, but I'm not sure whether that installs as a dependency. Let's see. Oh, it's just a typo. The T and the S are around the wrong way. Oh, or maybe there's an extra T in there. Just a typo.
Yeah, install.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely want to restart R for sure. And then the next one to try is knit R, all one word.
Yeah, okay.
And then if you're still running into trouble, let's keep your pink sticky note so that we know you're doing that, just so we're kind of keeping track of. It's not very sticky, is it? I'll find it. Nice one. There we go. Yeah, so we're going to just overwrite what you had in your Markdown document with all of this. We're just deleting everything that you had in the Markdown document and copy and paste all the raw from this presentation in. Nice one. You guys are good. Has everybody copy and pasted the raw presentation file in? Has everyone followed these instructions and at least copied it in? Maybe you're still having knitting issues, but have you actually copied all the raw in? Excellent, so I can move on to the next slide. So we're knitting these notes, and your first try knitting them, you may have been prompted to install some packages. That's fine, we need those packages. Just click OK through all the prompts in order to knit your document. It's really annoying having the presentation pop out like that, which Taylor here, it's Taylor, right? Taylor has going right there. So let's fix that. Let's fix the popping out of the presentation. We're going to modify this thing called a YAML. And it's an odd thing to shove into an intro to our workshop, but what I wanted to highlight was that we can toggle an R Markdown document between your HTML notes and a presentation really easily doing this. So all I want to do is just change the top of your document. If you go to the very top, you'll find this thing called the YAML, and this outlines what is the structure of the document. Is it a presentation? Is it just a file? Do you want to output a PDF? That's where you put the options in. And there are a lot of options you can put in. For example, I just launched my blog from R Markdown. So at the moment, HTML document downwards is all hashed out. I want you to unhash that, and I want you to hash out the presentation, because you don't want to look at it as a presentation. We've got the slides up on the screen. You want to see all your notes as a document. So let's change that. And the other thing I want you to do, which I think was on the previous slide, so my apologies, is to go to the little drop down next to your knit symbol. There's a little knitting symbol of a ball of wool with some knitting needles sticking out of it. Right next to that, there's a little sort of wheel. I want you to go to that drop down and choose viewer rather than pop out window or whatever what's the option? So next to the wheel, yeah. So there's knit and then there's a drop down and then there's a wheel and a drop down. I want you to go next to the wheel, I think. Yes. And if we've got preview in window and preview in viewer pane, and I'd like you to switch over to viewer pane. Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure. All right. So let's see. Okay, so all we need to do is go to raw. Raw. And that just takes us to the raw code, and we're just going to copy and paste all of this. So you can press Control A to select all, Control C and Control V. And yeah, we're going to copy and paste this all into the R Markdown document in RStudio. Yep, and that's it. And just delete all of that and copy and paste in the raw. All of it. Chuck it all. That's it. Beautiful. So this should take you to a viewer pane. And so this is our third pane that we've met. So far we've met the console, the environment, and by switching over to viewer, we now have a viewer, we now see it pop up in the viewer pane. And what you should see now is not a presentation anymore, but an HTML document that you can see from the viewer pane. So nothing's popping out of RStudio, you can just work from RStudio and nothing else. Let's see. Let's have a look-see. So we, yep, that's looking good. But I don't think you've knitted again though. Have you knitted since you changed that?
Yeah. Do you have to change anything?
You have to knit again. So every time you change your Markdown document, in order for it to, the HTML to render over here, we have to knit all over again. And so it should be quite a dramatic change. Oh, hang on, we haven't changed. So the output, we need to change that. And before we move on, let's just use this. So next to the knitting ball with the needles in it. Oh, you got viewer pane, yeah, okay. Oh, you've done that. No, you've done that right. You've changed it over to viewer pane. Yep. And so now what we need to do is change the output from this, where you've got HTML, TOC, and TOC float all hashed out. We need to unhash those and hash out the presentation, because you want to get rid of presentation. I need a presentation because I'm talking, but you guys don't need to have it popping out and being an annoying slideshow. We would just like to see some notes.
So if you're on a Mac and you're having trouble finding an Markdown document, you may require Xcode to be installed.
Good tip, Steph. Lovely. Seeing some,
That's my guess.
so do we think that's cool? Like, I think that was really cool, being able to toggle easily between a presentation, like a beautifully rendered HTML presentation, with GIFs and potentially interactive simulations and all sorts of crazy stuff, and then flick it over to an HTML document that you can view within the pane. As someone who teaches code and lectures code, I think this is a wonderful teaching tool. So I just wanted to share that with you as a lecturer myself, because I assume many of you are also lecturers. Xcode. If you're on a Mac, you might need Xcode. Are you struggling? Okay. Oh, but you'd like to know for future reference? I think, so I've switched, I nuked my laptop from Orbit. I do have a MacBook Air, but it's running Linux. I rage quit Apple. It's a long story. Well, it's just a ragey story. Anyway, I dimly recall, I think, I ran a Mac for about a decade, and I think I always had to install Xcode. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so we've all got notes. So now you have these slides, and so you don't need these because you have all the notes for the whole workshop right in front of you. So if I move on to a slide and you're going, hey, wait a second, what did that say? You've got it right there in your notes. Very handy. And the wonderful thing about that TOC float option gives you this really nice navigable little interface on your HTML document. So in order to find what was said a couple of slides ago, let's practice doing that right now. So using the table of contents in your viewer pane, yeah? Sorry? We're about to do that. Yeah, so I just wanted to flick that over. We're going to talk about this. Sorry, this is commenting and stuff, but yeah, like let's not, yeah. One thing at a time. So we've rushed through a few things like this hashing stuff, and we are going to get into that. But I just wanted you to get, to the having your notes yourself as quickly as possible so you can write notes for yourself into the document as we come up with cool things. Like, what is the hashing thing is a good question. Why did we hash those out? What does that do? You might want to write notes about that. So the first thing, so we're kind of rushing through to get you the notes so that you can take notes for yourself. So using the floating table of contents in your viewer pane, I want you to navigate to the picture of Hillary Clinton as a witch. Has everybody done that? To show me that you're comfortable with, because this way I know that you can jump back a few slides and get the information. So this is just to reassure me that you're all feeling comfy. All right, so here, you're still running your pop-out window. Let's shut that down.
Okay.
Yep.
So
Let's just press the X. And next to your knit button, next to the knit button with the knitting wheel, says wheel. And there's a drop-down choice there. Yep, that's it. And select preview in viewer pane as opposed to preview in window to stop the pop-outs.
come here.
And then it comes here, and now you've got this clickable thing. So I want you to go to the fitting data set and find Hillary Clinton. Now, if you open it up if you widen the viewer pane a little bit, the table of contents will pop out on the left-hand side. So you still need to widen a little bit more. Keep widening. There it is. And now you have an interactive, see what I mean? So we want to widen the viewer pane large enough. I see Hillary Clinton there. How are you girls doing? Do I see some Hillary Clintons? Thank you. Excellent. Fantastic. So that's how you can navigate the HTML document that you've produced in your viewer pane. But we can also navigate the code. Now, I promised you that you could annotate these notes, so let's do that right now. We're going to create a section at the top of the document called Useful Tips, or whatever you want to call it. And we're going to create this as the first section. So currently the first section of the document is Hi! And right above that, let's create a section called whatever you like, Useful Tips. And as you can see, we use hashes to create headings. So the number of hashes is just the level of the heading. So one hash is the highest level you have, the biggest heading, and the more hashes, the smaller the heading gets. Yes? Very true. Oh. Yes, in fact, we've already met that because we just hashed within the YAML, and that had a very different function to what we're using it for now, which is for headings. So within that YAML at the top of the document, it does different things because it's treating it more like code. We can also add bullet points with dashes. So if I type dash Euclid dash Beanie, if you follow me on Twitter, then you'll know those are my cats. 2 of my 3 cats, anyway. Or their full names, Lord Euclid of the Fluffy Butt is his full name. And
Of course, we need to make it in this black, or we have to type only here and there?
sorry?
If you want to make it in
Oh, right. Yeah, so we want to write it just above the high. Like literally right above there. Let's not, not above this chunk, not above that, just above high. And we can put in tables, images, interactive simulations, and all sorts of really cool stuff into an R Markdown document. There are 2 cheat sheets. I'm not sure why there are 2 cheat sheets, but there are 2 cheat sheets on R Markdown. And those are a veritable font of wisdom on how to do really cool stuff in your R Markdown documents. Lots of really cool default settings. There is a whole deep dive you can go into in customizing everything, and it is a rabbit hole that is just so easy to end up going down. And I'd warn you off it, but we all end up there eventually. So let's so that's what we were when we were writing that, when we were brainstorming those ideas. Now it's your turn to annotate it. So let's just practice annotating. So let's create the heading, add a bullet point, and ask around for a cool R tip or one that you remembered from before, or something that you've learned in this workshop, and reneat the document and bask in how gorgeous your HTML output is. If the knitting's taking a bit of a while, it's getting a bit annoying, you could try deleting the images. So you can always get them back from my GitHub if you want, the template of it. It'll speed it up. So now that we've all got the notes, and we can all start to move a little bit more at our own pace rather than all getting, forcing everyone to move slide by slide. So now that you've got the notes, I really want to point to at the very end of the notes, there are extension exercises. So if we're currently talking about something you just know all about it, that's when you flick over to your green sticky note, look around for other people with green sticky notes and possibly form a little group and start working on some extension topics. There are lots of people here who can help. There's many of us, so we can all, and there's lots of people in the audience who are quite advanced, so I can point to a few right now, like these three sitting there. And so you don't have to just get stuck on the exercise. You can have a look at some of the extension topics, like that leaflet one that I mentioned before. But for those of you who are still following along, packages are collections of other people's code. So we've been talking about packages a little bit, like tidyverse. How would you describe a package, Steph?
I would say a package is a bunch of useful stuff that somebody's put together. It's just a collection of different functions and things like that. So I write them all the time, not for any particular reason, but just to collect bits of code that I use a lot. Like I said, I'm really lazy. I'm trying to write the same piece of code 3 times and then a bit more and so on. It's just easier for me to push it all together. So in my consulting work, I had a package that I designed mostly for saving myself time. Things like timekeeping. I made myself a punch card. Do you remember the cartoons where the cartoon animal walks into the factory and punches on so they can get paid? I made one of those in half. I could use it wherever I was because I was too lazy to keep an Excel spreadsheet going of all the time that I was spending in places. So it can be simple things like that that just make your life easier, or it can be incredibly complex, interesting things like GT.2 or the tidyverse that is, deep philosophical ideas translated into code. I specialize in the former.
Yeah, packages, I couldn't agree more. Packages are collections of, it's other people's code that they've written up so you don't have to write it. I mean, you sit down to do something and often someone's already written the code to do this thing. So let's use their stuff because, like Steph, I'm lazy. So, in this case, we want to import the witch trials data, and we're going to use some tools from the tidyverse. Like we've been banging on about, we think the tidyverse is a really handy collection of tools to make particularly this sort of some of the annoying stuff that I think is associated with building up an R analysis, like the communication factors and the wrangling of the data. R base R, what it comes with, has already got some wonderful statistical algorithms, but it's the other stuff that bringing the data in, visualizing it, that's where tidyverse really kicks in. And so we're going to use that to import our data. In order to import it, we need to use a function from the tidyverse. So packages are collections of other people's code, and that code might be generating tables, it might be generating, it might be a function, and the function simply says, run this other person's code for me. So functions in R take the form of a word followed by the parentheses. Notice that I've got the word function in quacks because function is not actually a function. Maybe it is, but we're not learning about that. We can also learn about functions by typing question mark and the name of the function into the console. And that will pop up a help pane for it. So let's all have a look at the help documentation for install.packages, which is how we're going to install the tidyverse. So we can do that from the previous slide, question mark function name. And don't forget, you can always navigate back to the last slide. using your floating table of contents. You guys have embiggened, good. Oh, in the console. Yeah, because the console is just a calculator and we only need to install a package once. We don't need to do it every single time we open up this document. Once you've got it installed on your computer, you're all good. I mean, you may need to update it from time to time, but you've got it there to use. So the console's like a one-time only calculation. So I like to install packages from the console rather than sticking in an R script where I might inadvertently be installing the package every time I knit the document, which is just going to slow everything down. Yeah, it's time for coffee, so I thought we'd install the tidy first and then go. Yeah. Yes, go. Yeah. So once we've had a look at the help documentation, have we all seen the help pane pop up now? So we've now met the console pane, the environment pane, the viewer pane, and this is taking us now to the help pane. Are we all looking at the help documentation for installer packages? If we haven't used it before, I mean, if you're completely comfortable with installer packages, by all means, skip it. Move on to an extension exercise. And you can, work on an extension exercise for a little bit and then jump back in when we catch up to where you're at. I'm really pretty cruisy about how you approach it. I don't mind if you're on the phone for half the workshop or, pick up what's useful to you here. So, let's everyone install the Tidyverse package. And once we've installed, we can all go have a coffee break and come back in 11. So as soon as you've installed your Tidyverse, go for coffee. Nice. That deserves a high five. Yeah. I think we'll be fine. Oh yeah. Telethon Kids Institute. Interesting. Oh, cool. I've never been to Western Australia. One day. Yeah.
What is this part?
Oh yeah, that's a document outline. So if we just let's just drag it over, embiggen it a little bit. Yeah, let's take that one and then drag it a little bit to that way, so we can read it a little bit. So that's giving you a document outline of the code.
Oh, okay.
So it's a bit like this. This will help you navigate this, but it's just like the floating table, but for the code scripts. So if you press on install.r, for example,
Yeah. Okay.
boom.